Hello. I didn't realize kind of how loud that was. That's better. Okay. Welcome. As I call this, it's a deep dive into a shallow pool because basically we're going to dive into Diablo 4 as it is, which was really just like a 20-minute demo. So I'm going to go by my notes. This is my post, by the way. And everything that we know about Diablo 4 so far by Icy Veins. So I'm gonna sort of skim through everything and just sort of get myself reacquainted with some of the things that were going on because I've seen a lot of material about this. So yeah, I guess let's start with let's start with items. Items are a good place to start. So if I have this correct, this is kind of the item endgame that they want you to get to. So what you're not seeing in this image is a chain of white, magic, rare, and then it feeds into, these are legendary set, and then ancient legendary, ancient set, and then mythic, which is this type of item. So essentially what I'm hoping they can do is, and one of the biggest concerns is how will they make low-level items useful, especially when you start to make progress in the game. So that means if you find a white item, is there anything you can do with it to upgrade it? Like with a rune word in D2's case, to make it endgame viable, right? So that's a big thing I want to know. And with blues, again referencing Diablo 2, are there stats that can roll on there that would still help in endgame, that fill in a small gap, but obviously you kind of will get rid of those things and end up with a rare possibly. And rares are a touchy subject because you do want them to be useful. It seems kind of like a cop-out to have your whole loadout just legendaries. It makes sense and it doesn't, because it forces you into an item type and then it just decreases the importance of everything behind it. And that's kind of why Diablo 2 speedruns succeed so well, is because, and even Path of Exile ones, is because those low-level items can give you an extra boost. They can roll an extra thing that you need that will at least help you, get through the content, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is, I don't think they should necessarily go with even the ancient item pool, because in D3 that meant just a stronger version of that item with a higher stat range. And again, in D3, items were more about getting the ones that you needed for those slots and not really having too much choice, but also maximizing the stats on them. So legendary started to lose importance when ancient came out, because those were so much better, and then primals came out, and then it's just turned into a kind of a wash. And the only thing that really brought legendaries back into really the spotlight was the Legacy of Dreams, because that would allow you to that gem would allow you to wear any legendary item and still receive a bonus. And that didn't happen until like recently. So that's really something that I think they need to look at. But I mean, items are going in an okay direction. I think mythic items could be really cool. I would rather have a stingier loot system where things don't rain from the sky, and they said they wouldn't, so that's cool. And Magic Find will make an appearance, but I kind of don't like what their approach is to that, because it's going to be strictly utility. They don't want you to have to decide between extra gold and Magic Find versus damaging stat. But, you know, I don't really care about needing to spec into Magic Find necessarily, because the loot hunt is part of what Diablo is about. So you want to have a better chance of finding like awesome stuff, right? And that's kind of a discussion that is just like a piece of the end game, so I won't touch that yet. But again, with items, I want everything to be important. I don't want like in D3 where you pick everything up and it's literally just trash that you're using for crafting items. And then you really don't see kind of what the point is, so your trips to town are constant, you're always hitting the blacksmith, and you're always going and just dumping all your stuff. So you could find 100 legendaries or whatever and scrap them all because they're not useful to you. So in that way, it kind of killed the significance of even finding a legendary or an item in general, as much as they started to tailor the system to drop more things that were relevant to you. It still kind of had an air of awkwardness to it, I guess, or just indifference. So, I mean, we're going down here and seeing that legendaries are going to be the focal point, like I said. This is a key thing, not going huge multipliers. They want to be able to do nerfs, which is great, honestly. It can be ancient, like I said. I'd rather they not do that. I'd rather legendaries be better than set items, but I want there to be that gray area with rares that have affixes that maybe can't roll on legendary items or have different things you can do with them. Again, very, you know, D2 kind of outlook, but that's fine. The limit on mythic items is great, I personally think. Being only able to equip one is very good. The affix list was not very big in the demo. And again, talking more about items, I hope that they expand the affix pool to the extent that there's a lot of things that can happen on rares, and there's like a crazy amount of combinations that you can have on yellows that you would never find on a legendary item. So I want there to be, again, you know, that choice without it being an illusion of choice to say, okay, you know, you have to use this item or you're going to be shit. Because that's literally what D3 is. You just find all your stuff and that's it. You know, I already spoke about rune words. Right now the system is pretty thin. And, you know, I hope they go full six runes, rune words, which again will help make the worst items, the whites, endgame viable, and it should upgrade them to like the legendary slot, basically, because that's what you're doing to them, and you should be able to remove what's socketed in there and just keep it. It doesn't matter if it goes into a separate inventory slot, like the charms that they're talking about or the quest items. It should be there, because really right now it's just 2 runes, a cause and an effect, the trigger and an effect, sorry. And it should be noted too overall that it's still early and there's a lot of overreactions that I'm seeing. And really what I'm giving is my hope. I know the game won't release this way, which is great. But at least getting all of this out there is going to be like the key point. So anyway, back to it. Rune words are a great way to make the white items useful, because if you find, you know, a 6-socket chest or a weapon and you want to put an awesome rune word in it, you should be able to do that. I don't want to have the PoE problem necessarily where loot's everywhere and I largely just ignore what's on the ground, because I need a loot filter to even minimize the load of crap that I'm seeing. So that's where I kind of want a happy medium between the D2 system and the D3 system and PoE, in that, you know, filter the loot for me, but also give me stuff that will matter. And you know, I mean, a game can't exist without shit items. They are there for a reason. But again, I want them to have some significance that you can still like go back and say, okay, I can use this for a purpose, even though it's a white item. So I spoke about rune words. Gems will be back. I talked about the magic find thing. Trading. There will be trading. I think there should be trading. I don't mind the nature of having a certain subset of items, like the 1% that you have to farm for and you can't trade. And then the rest of them are just like either trade all the time, like consumables, white items, blues, rares. And then the legendaries can be the ones that are trade once. So it will bind on trade, and if I find something, I can use it, which is available right now in the demo version at least. So I can use an item for as long as I want, and then when I'm done with it, I can give it up. Cool. That's amazing. Crafting. This is something that I want to make a hard comeback. Especially in the realm of rares again. I hope there's a robust enough stat pool that modifying the affixes on those can give you an item that at least competes with a legendary that you might want or need. And I'm glad they're actually at least considering the like +1 skill or granting a talent from the talent tree. That's huge. We should be able to have that kind of control. So I think that's about it for items. Gambling for gold is back. Oh, and they don't have a shoulder slot, they don't have a belt, and they don't have bracers, which is fine. And that has reduced the loadout to 10 items, if I'm not mistaken. But that's okay. Skills and talents. I don't need to go too much into this because hardly any of them were ready, and it was just a demo. So the skills themselves I think, are in a good place because you can't respec, which will make your choices matter a lot. And they can be ranked up, which to me is a huge thing. I mean, like, thank you. There's actual skill progression in a new Diablo game. Like, why I needed to be excited about this is just beyond me. But anyway, this is it as it is. They highlighted some skills. This is the sorceress one. So, you know, again, very, very comfortable with how this is going. And they are actually only limiting you to 6. So it'll be a primary mouse button, secondary mouse button, and 1, 2, 3, 4, a lot like D3. The talents, I want them to expand this. I want them to consider what Path of Exile is, and in that tree, you don't use a lot of the nodes because they don't relate to what you're doing. So if you could just like take a wedge of that pie and make that a character stat like talent tree, that would be amazing, because then you could path to a bunch of different things. Because this is kind of like I've heard it described as a stat twig. It's very short and like tiny, and there are, you know, a decent amount of nodes, but you know, I want to be able to go past, you know, a few levels. Is there anything else I can talk about on that? Skills and talents will be affected by items. We know that much. And a big sort of, I guess, I don't know, concern, worry, gripe I have is that I don't want oversimplicity to take over the game as it is, because in Diablo 3 they sacrifice too much for approachability. They wanted a game that everyone could play and everyone could progress in, but it killed the endgame experience of content that, you know, only a small piece of the community could get to, right? Again, that's Path of Exile thing. Only a small sliver of people have actually either gotten through the game or like killed Shaper, for instance. But you know, you can use a lot of different builds to do that, and you know, just putting time into the game shouldn't give you necessarily all the power. It should be a bit of RNG and a bit of your own planning, because D3, again, all it turned into was time investment. And again, going back to gear, it reduced the significance of that, because now someone with worse gear in 1 or 2 slots than you could be 30% or more powerful just by virtue of having spent more time and farmed more paragons. And you know, that can take us into the endgame discussion. So firstly, I want there to be a lot to do. Secondly, if there's a leveling system beyond the core leveling system, I don't want it to increase power. That is a huge thing for me. I don't want, if they have Nephilim levels, I don't care what the hell they call them, but I don't want that system to be anything more than visual. Like, I want, you know, if I have 1,000 of these, like, you know, post endgame, these post like campaign levels or whatever, I just want it to be, you know, a little like fashion stat, like it unlocked a portrait, right? Or it unlocked a transmog or what have you. Something that I had to work for, but nothing that differentiates the power level of my character just because I spent 10 more hours than you did playing. I want, you know, there to be a decent chance for someone to just like strike it big and say like, oh, I found this awesome item, I want to use it. And it doesn't matter that, you know, your end game level is 1,000 higher than mine. We're still pretty much equal, right? And like there's always going to be some sort of meta that comes out. There's always going to be some sort of builds that everyone uses, but choice should be available, and they do want that to be a thing, which is good. They talked about one of the endgame activities being dungeons, which are an idea that are based off of Greater Rifts. I hope they don't scale infinitely. I hope there's a cap. I hope that it's difficult to get to. And I hope that cap is like realistic. So if you're a casual person playing the game, you can get through. This one's rank 15. You can get to rank 20. But if I have better items and I put more effort in maxing or something, I can get 5 tiers higher than you, or 10 tiers. A lot of things I like about the world is that there's no linear campaign. You can do it however you want. You can see people running around in the world, but not enough that it's crowded. That only happens at world bosses. And you can see in this image that we're dealing with a way bigger piece of world right now. They said that this is all they're developing for now. I hope that expansions uncover the rest of the map. Like I want to be able to go to here, the Scovos Isles. I want to see their vision of like Ariat, Honduras, West March kind of thing. And get a chance to ride my mount through there. Because that's going to be great. Like I want to see the type of distance that we can cover. And I've seen a lot of people ask this question is like, how long is it actually going to take for me to ride my mount from like here all the way down? I'm hoping that takes a decent amount of time. I hope it's no small feat, and I hope that movement speed is capped such that your mount is always going to be a faster option. So that's going to be pretty huge. And again, I hope the world is giant as well. I like the variety they're approaching this with. I like the fact that they're asking for a lot of feedback. I like the darkness, the grittiness. People have said that this looks like Diablo 3. I think they're full of it, honestly. I think this does not look like Diablo 3. This is way better. It's much improved. In D3, a big thing was the corners of rooms were lit, which sucks. In D4, they're allowing that to happen. They're allowing not that to happen. They're allowing it to fade into darkness. So that's huge. You can even see in this image that the rims are dark, the edges. There's going to be PvP. There's going to be a lot of social features which we don't know about yet. There is going to be some monetization. I hope the expansions offer like a lot of content, and I hope it's meaningful, but I hope they also don't gate stuff like talent tree extensions only in those things, because then that creates a paywall into builds that would be otherwise possible. So I hope that we get the builds and everything, but like the areas are locked off, or certain smaller features that you don't need to, that you would like actually pay for, are available. But that's another matter. You won't be able to buy power. Huge thing, like giant kudos. I hope there's just like skins, transmogs, pets, portrait frames, wings, all the like cheesy fashion stats stuff you want. There was some concern about being able to rebind your left click to force move, which is a thing also in Path of Exile, because you don't want to click something and accidentally attack it. The way you would get around it in D2 is generally equip the left mouse button as throw. So if you didn't have anything throwable, it just wouldn't do anything and not respond. But you don't want to walk up to an enemy, click behind it to move there, and then fire an ice bolt, because then your character is prone to being stun locked, which there is no diminishing returns on crowd control. It's full duration all the time. So you would have to either have an ability to cast or be mindful enough that you're clicking in the right spots. And that's going to be quite a big thing in itself, because I want to be able to have that kind of like mobility and not have to bind my force move to my mouse wheel, for example. The crowd control thing is good. I think they really need to revisit it for PvP versus PvE. I think that's going to be huge. And I want to be able to if I'm engaging in PvP, fully stun lock someone, right? And really go at it, because the system currently will allow you to break out of it fairly easily, as I understand it, and then just keep going, and you'll just have this dance. Which is kind of silly. Expanding a bit on skills, and this just came back to my mind. I hope I didn't miss anything. Oh, yes, okay. Skills. An important point I didn't touch on. I don't want cooldowns. I think they're a poor excuse for gameplay. I think that having your entire bar unavailable shouldn't be a thing. What I think should happen is, for the sorceress, for example, it should just be full mana based. It should just be, I don't have enough mana to cast this skill, but I have a generator available, which is like Ice Bolt or something, and I can just, CC a target while I'm regenerating mana, use a potion, get my resource back up, and there you go. Because in Diablo 3, the cooldown meta and having resource costs really killed a lot of builds, unless items either reduced it significantly or removed it entirely, so that you could have just the internal cooldown of the skill and not deal with the full 2 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever. And even the Barb has an ability in D3 that reduces the cooldown of the Wrath of the Berserker by 30 seconds. Why do I need that? It's like Fervor on the Crusader, 20% cooldown reduction, right? Silly. You can use those passives and talents for much more meaningful things, reducing resource costs, which is I think the way to go. I don't think both are the answer. I would rather have the consumable potions as they are. Maybe also bring back mana pots and have 2 potion buttons, or have it be hybrid potion that heals both your resource and your health by a certain percentage over time, much like the old D2 potions, not necessarily like the legendary potions that we have in D3, which you can't use just for the effects. You have to actually be missing health, but that's a whole nother thing. So I guess, like, my biggest things overall are don't reduce the importance of items so much that time is the way to get power, because that's what Paragon points currently are in D3. Sorry. Pardon me. Sorry about that. So yeah, the item hunt should be the main thing. They've acknowledged that killing monsters should be your primary way of getting loot. Trade should be efficient. And I would like to go back to a resource-based way of combat, because yes, it still charges, but it prevents you from doing things like necro builds in D3, where all you do is walk around and just hope your team can hold off whatever's there, and you just like walk around trying to avoid things for like an entire minute until Land of the Dead comes up. Very silly thing to do. It really breaks the gameplay experience when I can't just decide to use a skill. I don't want to be told how to play the game. I want to, like, again, a very D2 level of skill combat where I can teleport to the boss if I want to, cast, static charge, get his health down like the Mephisto fight, teleport away, cast Blizzard, and just have it be a much more dynamic thing, rather than, okay, well, now I have to rotate to, this skill. Oh, this is gone, so this is all I have left. Let me press that. Don't want that available. So again, I've probably said this quite a few times already, and I hope I'm not rambling, but, if you're here, thank you very much for listening. It's been, what, 30 minutes? 32? Okay. What else have I got? There will be hardcore mode, there will be seasons. Controller support is a thing that I wish didn't bug me as much. But again, I want there to be that separation of skill levels in the game where, someone can pick it up easily and do like the campaign in general open world easily. But I want there to be that hard gate that sort of like has that power test to say that, you need to advance your gear to a certain point before you can actually start doing this content. And, that's what will help differentiate things for me, because then you can say, okay, well, I got all this great gear, I know how everything works, and I have an advantage for that. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but again, I don't want the end game to come down to an investment of time. I don't want my power to specifically come from, I spent 12 or 14 hours farming rifts, and I got my whatever number of Paragon levels, and now I'm that much percent stronger, so I can do more pushing. I think the Greater Rift system in itself is pretty good, but the power creep in D3 just made a lot of the rest of the activities really insignificant, and that's when you see people complain about the difficulty, when really Diablo 3 is actually a slower game than Path of Exile is at this point, literally because of Greater Rifts and the difficulty that they present. These things don't need to have a timer. Yes, that presents its own type of challenge, but that also forces you to min-max your choices. Your very micro can I kill this mob, or should I? Like, how much progress will it grant me? And then you get into this whole granular like sub meta of raider rifts, because now you're farming for an area, you're farming for mob types, and you're farming for efficiency, because you know, the ideal one is one big level of your ideal type. And I hope that, you know, extends into the world such that, you know, everything kind of feels more open, but also the areas kind of like differentiate themselves. So you sometimes have to go through a tight map, but others you're going to be running around in the open world and you can just go anywhere. And I also hope they keep the climbing because of the verticality. That's amazing. Totally should stay in the game. But you know, my biggest thing is that I don't want the game to be dumbed down for any specific audience. I want it to have that end game that you can really like almost overanalyze, right? I want there to be some obvious choices, and having plus skills on certain things will be one of those ways that, you know, could be a noob trap to say like, I'm going to make this choice because I get +1 to these skills, which I'm using right now, which is amazing. But, you know, something else might be better, hopefully in the form of a rune word that you can equip. And, you know, then you can say, you know, this thing is way better. And, you know, if someone comes and inspects you and says, hey, how did you find that? It's a moment of discovery, right? Then they can say, oh, that's something, that's a goal I can create for myself. That's, you know, this power increase that I see. Or they can even ignore it and say, hey, you know what? My character is at a decent point right now. I can still do content. I don't care about being at your power level, which is still a huge distinction from D3, because for a very long time there were a tiny set of builds and everything else was just swept to the side. So it's kind of tiring to have kept seeing those like 10 billion, you know, % more damage. I'm glad it's going to be plus skills, talents, and stuff like that. But at the same time, I want more complexity than just attack and defense. I want there to be some meat to that. I hope they break it down into something. Doesn't need to be stat allocation, because that stat allocation, especially in D2, was really pointless. All you needed was enough strength or like enough dexterity, and then the rest just went into vitality. And in D3 it was ultra pointless because you were just looking for main stat. And in rare cases you were looking for armor, so you would equip dexterity or strength, depending on what class you were. And even as a strength class you would put diamonds to compensate because you wanted more resistances. And again, a lot of those systems didn't really play into it, which is just kind of how the game worked out over time. But I think that's about it. I don't think I should necessarily dive into the classes at this point because they're so new. I think the overall systems is a better approach. Like I saw a lot of the skills and I saw how the druid played, which is like amazing. I think that will be like my first playthrough of the game is on druid. There are a lot of amazing things going on with this game, and the sheer size of it just excites me. So what I'm going to do also is include the links to the stuff I'm looking at in the description. I'm going to send this to YouTube as well. I know it's like 40 minutes, but it was all very worth talking about, and if I miss something, you can go and see it for yourself. yeah, like don't infinitely scale, have area levels. That's amazing. I hope they keep that. It was in the demo for testing purposes. It should be a thing that exists, in my opinion, because it gives some complexity and, again, that sort of like gut check when you enter a place, that it's not just as easy as like, bam, okay, well, I'm done now. Yeah. Yeah, I think I covered a lot. I think I covered everything. Yeah. So anyway, if you're still here, I very much appreciate it. If you want to see more content like this, drop a follow. Again, I'm going to post this on YouTube. I'll link all the relevant stuff in the description. I'm going to be streaming the living crap out of this game when it comes out. I will be watching for updates. I will likely do videos on those updates. We are getting them quarterly. Yeah, and I guess like see you guys on the other side. Peace out, and follow me.